Yes, appointed
There, yep,
2020.
you are.
2020. All right, I will call this meeting to order of the SAU 39 board. It is 6:02 and we're at Sauhegan High School. The date is April 6, 2022. Please do.
All right, guys, you want to stand up? Raise your hands. All right. You're going to say I. Say your name. I was going to say Steve. You solemnly swear that I will bear faith and true allegiance to the United States of America and the state of New Hampshire, and will support the constitutions thereof. So help me God. I state your name. Do solemnly and sincerely swear and affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a Vernon School Board member, according to the best of my abilities, agreeable to the rules and regulations of this Constitution and laws of the state of New Hampshire. So help me God. Congratulations, guys. Welcome aboard.
All right, I will recall the meeting to order at 6:03. Now that we have, I believe, all 17 members of SAU number 39 present. The first order of business and my first responsibility this evening is for the purpose of appointing a chairman of the SAU 39 board. For the public's understanding, there is a policy about how the board votes that's tied back to our statutes and requires that every board, meaning the three constituent school boards, the Amherst School Board, the Mount Vernon School Board, and the Sauhegan Cooperative School Board, each collectively receive 3 votes in any one of those processes where a motion is made. Those 3 votes are distributed proportionally based on the number of members who are present and voting. If one of the boards, a majority of one of those 3 boards asks for a weighted vote, then that vote will be taken via a weighted vote, which also adds a calculation involving our previous ADM, average daily membership of students as of this previous June. So I'm prepared for either method after spending some time with our policy today. So with that said, the way I'd like to handle selecting the chair is I'll open the floor for nominations. There does not need to be a second for any nomination. I'll just simply make a list of all of the nominations that are received. If there are more than one nomination, then we'll have a show of hands where every member will get a vote, and then I'll tally those according to the 3-vote rule. If there's only one person that receives a nomination, then I'll simply ask for a second, and the SAU board can take a vote on that person's nomination. So is that any objections to that process?
No objections, but a point of order before we begin is I'm not sure why this meeting is called before all the constituent boards have organized themselves. As I understand, Mount Vernon has not organized itself right now. I think it speaks to the ability of us here to assume roles. If Mount Vernon hasn't organized themselves and on their committee assignments, it seems premature for us to meet here and conduct this business. I mean, there are some exceptions for tonight's business. The non-public stuff, my matter's on there, and I think there's some other matters that are on there that are salient and urgent and should be addressed today. But the rest of this, to me, is premature.
All right, well, I can certainly entertain a motion to adjourn, and that would be a motion that any member could make to a later date. Or I could ask if there's any members of the Mount Vernon School Board who are present who object to the timing of this meeting, in which case we could consider a motion to recess until after they've had a chance to organize themselves. So I'll open the floor for either Mount Vernon School Board members or any member of the board to make a motion to adjourn. Hearing none, I will open the floor for nominations for chair of the SAU 39 board. Are there any nominations? Ms. Goulet-Zimmerman.
I nominate John Glover.
John Glover?
Mr. Steele, when you're ready, I have a nomination I would make.
Yes, Mr. Gothier.
Stephen O'Keefe.
There have been 2 nominations thus far, John Glover and Stephen O'Keefe. Are there any further nominations for chair? Mr. Glover?
Sarah Lawrence.
Are there any further nominations? All right, without objection, I'll ask if each of those 3 who are nominated would be willing to serve in that role. Is that prudent? Before being elected to the role, might we ask if they'd be willing to? So Mr. Glover, would you be willing to serve in that role?
Yes.
All right. Mr. O'Keefe, would you be willing to serve in that role? And Ms. Lawrence? All right. Mr. Glover, do you object to her being withdrawn from the list of nominees? Okay. Very good. So with that said, we have 2 nominations on the floor. And so each member of the SAU 39 board gets their own personal vote. I will tally those based on which board you belong to and let you know how those votes carry out. This is a spreadsheet that I've shared with all of you. I see a number of you have logged into it as well, as you can see this. I hope some of you have checked my math and double checked my math because this is important stuff and I want to make sure we get this right. If with that said, I'd like to call the vote on the first round. Without objection, we'll start with Ms. Parisi and go around. Yeah. Without objection, I'd be happy to open the floor to the 2 candidates. Any objection to that? We'll go in the order of nomination. Mr. Glover, I think you were nominated first. The floor is yours.
Personally, I didn't seek this nomination. But take a moment to share the vision of leadership that I brought to SAU last year that I think is missing from this board, which is the role of the chair as a facilitator and not a parent or a commander or a dictator. That is, that way it works itself out in sharing of information early and often. So that all members. Do you have a microphone? I do not. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Feel free to rewind.
I'll rewind. And so for the benefit of our public, I started off by saying I did not seek this nomination. I appreciate the thought. My vision of leadership that was brought to the Sauhegan board, which was new from what I had seen in the past 6 or 7 years that I've been paying attention, was a board chair that is a facilitator for their members, who distributes information early and often so that there's an underlying factual bases are known by every member, so that when we come to meetings that we have the best chance to have a fruitful, intelligent, meaningful debate upon the issues, and that we can come to sensible decisions as we can under the circumstances. Another vision of leadership is that we were not going to go into meetings alone. We would always at least be in pairs, and at Sauhegan we have the option as well to be 3 because of our 7-person board. The point of that was so that no one felt like they had carrying all the load, that there was a distribution of the work, and could hear the information coming from administration. We had a very powerful administration. I thought this would strengthen the board to be a counterweight to that administration, be able to test the proposals of the administration in a more robust manner. That's why Stephanie Granda and I would attend all the agenda setting meetings together. That's why all of our committees, if somebody couldn't go, that there was another alternate to go in their place. I thought at the time that would protect us a little bit from the power of the administration, so that one person didn't feel overwhelmed. As it turns out, the way things unfolded last year, it's also positive on the other direction as well. So that's my vision of leadership. I urge this board, whoever's elected chair, to operate in a similar manner. so that we all benefit from the information, the factual basis, and we don't end up sitting here hearing information for the first time when a board chair or the leadership structure has had time and days and weeks to contemplate and mull over whatever the proposition of the day is. I think that our constituents would benefit from that. I think as members, we'll be able to contribute more importantly and more robustly if that's the way we operated here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Mr. O'Keefe.
Great, I'll keep my comments brief. A lot of stuff actually is on the radar for this board over the course of the next year, including the hiring and the process to find our new leader. And that process has to be collaborative across all the members of this board, and more importantly, our communities. The town of Mount Vernon and the town of Amherst putting their minds together to find the next leader of the school community is probably the number one thing that we have on our plate over the course of the next 12 months. What I envision is partnering together and finding 2 members of each board to get together between our May meeting and our June meeting to map out what that's going to look like. And getting all the stakeholders, working with our HR department to figure out how we could best approach that and get all of the stakeholders of our community involved in that process from the get-go. And then we could start the process in August, September, October, November, however that committee decides to go ahead and venture out that path. The other things that I think that this board is going to need to really focus on is the collaborative effort that we all have or have operated on over the past 4 years, and that's the operating as one philosophy. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of discussion about consolidation, and chaired by Ms. Lawrence a couple of years ago, we hit some roadblocks there, and those roadblocks were pretty significant. And so the out-of-the-box thinking that we had was to, inside the confines of this SAU board, was to operate as one. And we've tried to do that over the last 2 years. I took over under the leadership of Ms. Facey when she was our SAU board chair, and I continued sort of that mission statement. And that's going to be the same exact thing going forward over the course of the next year. Collaboration is extremely important, and making sure that everyone's voices are heard. And I think that's the absolute number one responsibility of any board chair. Don't squash any feedback, regardless if you agree with it or not. If you disagree with it, that's fine. Have an open conversation. Encourage people to speak up. Encourage people to share their views, so everyone comes to the table knowing what everyone around them is thinking. That's the number one responsibility of a chairperson. That's all, sir.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. Given that we're voting for one of 2 choices, I made a slightly different spreadsheet that I hope will tally correctly for us. So with that said, without any further comments or objections, I think we'll go around and vote. If you would take your time in voting so I can record these properly, start with Ms. Parisi.
I'll start.
Hold on one second, just because
Different school board. Different school board.
that's okay.
Is anybody promising free dinner at these meetings?
Christy.
I will, but I'm not running, but I'll feed you.
His other
I
four.
will vote for.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I voted for O'Keefe.
Glover.
Okay. I'll vote for Glover. I want to make it easy.
I'll vote for Glover as well.
O'Keefe.
O'Keefe.
Mr. O'Keefe.
Glover.
All right, I recorded someone in the wrong spot. However, I think I'm not sure that it matters. So I
You
think,
gotta watch the waiting though.
so I did not calculate the weighting yet, but looking at, I can go back over this. So somehow, Mount Vernon, by the time we got to Mr. Vayu, I didn't have a spot left for his vote. So let me just go back over this and we'll do by board, if you don't mind, go the opposite way perhaps, so I can get these absolutely right. So Mr. Vayu, Glover. You're watching me here, right? O'Keefe. Okay. That's how Egan, O'Keefe.
O'Keefe.
So Egan, O'Keefe.
Glover.
Mount Vernon, Glover. Sauhegan,
Glover.
Glover. Mount Vernon. O'Keefe, Mount Vernon, O'Keefe.
Glover.
Sauhegan, Glover. Mount Vernon, O'Keefe. I think all three, O'Keefe. Okay. So then, if we do we count these right here. So this equals that, sum of that. So if the weighted votes are calculated correctly, it's 6.7 votes to 2.3 votes for Mr. O'Keefe. So I'll declare Mr. O'Keefe elected as chairperson, and we'll turn the meeting over to you, Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Happily.
I look forward to partnering with everyone over the course of the next year. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and entertain motions for nominations following the same process for our vice chair. Ms. Beebe. Josh, you accept?
Sure. I'd be honored. I'd be honored.
Awesome. Any other nominations?
I was going to nominate Josh also. So. He's very popular.
Any more nominations?
I want to nominate the new guy, Jason.
Still, I'm gonna go for Josh.
You can turn it down. And you're
Oh, yeah, I'll
allowed.
turn it down. But I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. So you do not accept?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Any other nominations? Great, seeing none, let's close. Let's take a motion and second it for Josh. Motion to vote or elect Josh as our vice chair. Made by Stephanie, Ms. Grubb. Second by Ms. Parisi. Seeing no discussion, let's call the vote. I think since there's only one, we can just raise your hands. So it's almost unanimous. No, it is unanimous. Thank you. So congratulations, Mr. Conklin.
Thank you. I look forward to serving.
Thanks. And let's do motions for secretary or nominations for secretary. Ms. Hinckley.
I'll nominate Victoria.
Ms. Parisi, do you accept? Thank you. Any other nominations for secretary? Seeing none, let's go ahead and entertain a motion to elect Ms. Parisi as our new board secretary. Made by Ms. Beam, second by Ms. Grunt. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. Great, that is unanimous. Thank you. Congratulations. And then we have some committee assignments here. And was CJ willing to serve as our treasurer yet again? So we'll check with her.
I spoke with her regarding Sauhegan and she said yes.
She can do both. She has done both.
Yeah.
It was my last understanding that she was willing to do for one more year.
Okay, so let's elect her, and then if she opts not to.
You
I'm sorry?
want to skip and I can verify?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. And then we also need to know Peg for the deputy treasurer as well. And then
Do that too.
professional development committee, what board has that responsibility this year? I know Terry had it for 2 years.
No, I've only been on it for one.
Oh, 1 year. Okay, so you still follow through one year.
Yay.
Perfect. And then we also have our SAU budget committee. Ms. Parisi is telling me no. So Ms. Grund,
I'll take it.
you want to do it?
Yeah.
Any other volunteers?
I'll do that.
Okay, perfect. Ms. Goulet Zimmerman and Ms. Grund are going to be our appointments, if there's no objections to the SAU budget committee.
There's generally only one, but let's see why you
I'm
can't.
thinking this year with the demand of the public about more transparency in our process, I really think that that's going to start probably this summer. And we're going to probably approach that a little bit differently. We're going to work with Stephanie, come up with a couple of ideas to present to the board for approval.
Should we have representation from more than one board if we want to work for that one?
Yeah, well, that's the point, right? And so to come up with a strategy where each one of our boards has participation in that. The individual from this board serving in a budget committee, remember, is really the eyes and the lens of the collective group, the 17 of us.
Okay.
And then each individual board sends their own representative to the SAU budget committee. So it's almost like Stephanie's doing a dual role, and Anna, you're going to do a triple role because you already have that seat. So who did the SAU budget committee at our meeting last night? Do you remember?
We combined it with the, so he can finance committee, so it's Dan and
Okay,
I believe.
so
Yeah.
we'll work that piece out.
Mhm.
And then, Mr. Superintendent, are we missing any other committees?
Manifest, 2 members.
Thank you. Awesome. Ms. Grund for the manifest. It's a great way for new members to sort of see what's coming in and out of
I can do it, Steve. if nobody else.
the same thing. Perfect.
It's all online, so it's easy.
All right.
Remember the buckets we used to have to trade around?
Oh, I didn't know that was on
We
the-
are good to go from that perspective. Anything else, Mr. Superintendent? We're missing-
Those are all the appointments we made in previous years. Just waiting on the treasurer and just the treasurer and deputy treasurer.
So let's recess because we did have an appointment at 6:15 with our legal counsel. What we're going to do is we're going to entertain a motion to recess under a non-meeting RSA 91A2 L. So we'll just take a quick motion for that. Mr. White,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Gothier. All in favor, please raise your hands. Great. Saying almost unanimous. Great, that motion passes. So we're now recessed.
Oh, sorry. I'll raise my hand for that. Sorry, I was thinking in my head. Lost
So we're
in my
going to
thoughts.
All right, everyone, we'll get started. We'll call the meeting back to order at 7:14. Is Danae ready? Awesome. All right, so we're going to begin with our public comment 1 of 1. So if any members of the public would like to address the board, come up to the mic, state your name, town in which you reside, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes. You got to turn the mic on too.
I'm gonna let someone go first to get the mic working, but I guess I'll struggle with it.
Flip it over and push the button on the bottom.
Hold it.
I can probably speak loud enough for Amherst to hear me. My name is Martin Goulet, town of Amherst, and I had prepared statements, but I also want to just point out, I'm a little dismayed, frankly. There was a fairly momentous vote taken in March, and I just want to remind the board of that. It's my interpretation of the vote in March was that the communities that elected you are expecting something different than what they've been getting. And so I hope that all of the board members and leadership recognizes that at least potentially that message was contained in that vote. My comments that I had prepared relate to the Glover Title IX matter, which I understand you may have just been discussing. So here we are in April of 2022, and we're still muddling through this topic. My interpretation of this is because to date, this board and its chair have been unwilling to follow its own decisions. I've been trying to secure information, the information I'm going to refer to in this comment, for literally months via right-to-know requests, literally months. When people criticize this and other SAU 39 boards for lack of transparency, it's experiences like mine that are at the root of it and what people are referring to. In January, the chair of this board was directed to clarify the role that this board needed outside counsel to play with respect to filling in as our Title IX coordinator for this Glover matter, because this board had determined, based on communications that had been issued, that it didn't appear clear that this hired person, this counsel, had been, that understood that they were to fulfill that role. So one question I have is, did the chair of this board ever execute that dictum that this board reiterated to the chair to communicate to outside counsel to clarify their role, especially the role in taking the first step of a Title IX coordinator in regards to finding whether or not an investigation was warranted? Secondly, did the chair of this board ever report back to this board as to the results of this clarification conversation? I could find no record of it in minutes, and in fact, in the last public meeting of this board, the chair had nothing to report on the topic. Has this board ever received a finding from outside counsel acting as the Title IX coordinator that an investigation in this case was warranted or was not warranted? Where was that finding? I don't remember that ever being publicly communicated. Since the actions of the SAU and outside counsel have been so opaque in this matter, I'm going to ask you to provide, in some publicly consumable format, answers to the following questions. I will be providing these in writing, and I'll be following up on the answers to them at the next meeting. Who hired outside counsel now performing the work on this matter? Was it the SAU or was it the SAU board? Who directed it? On what authority? What was the scope of work procured from counsel? Usually this is outlined in something called an engagement letter. I'd like to see a redacted version of that engagement letter, which the SAU has claimed privilege on. What that means is that they believe that they're legally entitled to withhold that from my right to know request. To me, even if, so what that essentially that's saying is, as a taxpayer, I have to fund services that are being procured, but I don't have the right to understand precisely what services are being procured. Now, there's case law on this particular point, and the SAU may very well win if I were decide to sue on this point. I think that's beside the point. The SAU should assert privilege, in my opinion, and this is something I think the board needs to discuss. The SAU should assert privilege when they have a compelling reason to assert privilege, not because they're legally entitled to assert privilege.
And Martin, we're over 3 minutes worth.
Then I'll just wrap up. Thank you for letting me speak. Transparency should dictate that privilege be waived whenever it's feasible. Engagement letters redacted for privacy or sensitive information are merely procurement documents. I can't think of any good reason why privilege should be asserted over procurement documents. In any event, the SAU desperately needs this board's guidance on when they cannot waive privilege, because they do not feel they have that freedom or flexibility themselves. Thank you. Thank you. Any other members of the public would like to address the board? Good evening. State your name, town in which you reside, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. This is Dwayne Purvis. I'm from Amherst. I've spoken at the previous 2 school boards regarding communications. This is not communications. You talk to us, we talk to you. It's not dialogue. That's going to have to change. The other thing I'm questioning of this entity, it's not a school board. It's a governing board of the SAU. But you kind of cleared some things up. You're acting like a school board. Even in the publication that went out on the 11th of March, start off with the SAU 39 school board. There's no such thing. And it might be semantics to some, but it does matter, because some of us voted for people on specific school boards to perform certain tasks. And that you all get together here and decide policies for everybody is questionable. I have a problem with that. There's some policies that don't fit. I'm not sure what else you do, but keeping in mind what happened this past election, that 2 of our school boards in Amherst are operating now in default, $1 million or so. And you do have authority over the SAU. You could, right here and now, perform some good faith gesture to the community to reduce the portion that's going to the SAU accordingly and give those districts some relief. So while the districts have to figure out what they're going to do and what they can't do and so forth, the SAU just moves right along. You have an opportunity. You can do something about that right now, and that might speak to the people. It certainly might speak to me. But it has been an issue. Who governs this budget of the SAU? There is no public input on that. And I'm not sure legally what's going to happen down the road, but the way it's working, the way it's going is not working. So I would appreciate it if you guys would take that into consideration. The other thing is, legally, you're only obligated to meet twice a year. You're not a school board. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the community like to address the board? Seeing none, thank you for your comments. We're going to move on to our consent agenda. We're going to start off, please comment if you have any concerns about a line, and then we'll stop real fast. Any concerns about number 1, anticipated revenue? Concerns about number 2, treasurer's report? Number 3, treasurer's report, February? Number 4, draft minutes, February 17th? Yeah, Chris. Did you get that today? Thank you. Number 6, May 16th, unsealed draft minutes. Number 7, May 18th, draft minutes. I'm sorry, March, thank you. Number 8, March 18th, unsealed draft minutes. Yeah, that's on there twice. Number 8 should be number 9, March 22nd, draft minutes. The next one, March 22nd, unsealed draft minutes. Next one, enrollment memo. Facilities report. Seeing no comments, we'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. with modified to the minutes as stated by Ms. Peters. Yep, motion by Mr. Gronstra. Thank you. And did I have a second by Ms. Clark? And seeing no discussion, let's go ahead and call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. John, are you going to vote?
I'm not going to vote.
Okay, great. So, no,
Nope. Abstain.
abstain. Thank you. So that motion passes. Next one is going to be individual board updates. We'll start off with Amherst.
All right, so we had our organizational meeting on Monday night. I'll be the chair for another year. Victoria will be our vice chair, and then Jason here to my right, our new guy, will be our secretary. We went through and assigned all of our committees as well. We did pass a resolution with a motion from our board to continue our facilities project and scope to look forward to putting something on the ballot next March. Obviously, that process is just beginning, so what that will look like, we do not know yet. That process is starting, and as a board, we are supporting that process. We discussed unassigned fund balance. We don't have much of it outside of revenue, so that will impact what we can do for anything end of year, either returning money to taxpayers or funding our capital reserve fund that passed on election day. Want to thank Amy for coming up with, or Amy and the SAU staff for coming up with the $495,000 and change that we needed to find a way to cut out of our budget to meet the default for next year. And then we also recognized Bethany Bernasconi, who will be leaving the district in her current position as principal at Amherst Middle School at the end of June.
Great, thank you. Then, yes.
We do Q&A with the board
Sure.
chairs. Who are your policy committee members?
Josh is one, and I can say the other.
I think it's Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria.
And then the second question, Tom, is you said that you have decided to go forward with the facilities project, the school renovation across the way, and the
We
new
have not specified what that will be, but we are looking forward to doing
something.
discussing and continuing the support of investigating a school project for next year. Again, the scope of that could be anything from something in our budget next year, could be something that's an $83 million school, or anything in between. We've not made any decisions about what that will be, but we've left all options on the table to investigate that and discuss that further.
Okay, yep, that's great. Because I'm glad to hear that it's not been decided exactly, and I'm looking forward to the Jfac, what their thinking is on this, because we need to really take a good hard look at that, what we're doing here, if we're going to solve the needs of the students in a short period of time. That's my opinion. So appreciate that, Tom. Thanks.
Great, let's go over to Ms. Grund with Sohegan.
There we go. Okay, we had our organization meeting last night, our first meeting. Sat our board. Christy Peters is our vice chair, and Anna Goulet-Zimmerman is our secretary after we talked her into it. We had a great presentation by community council to just inform the new members of the board what their role is, kind of remind us, get a dialogue going of making sure that we're all on the same page and how we're going to start working together. We had a great discussion on domain leaders, where we understand the work that they're doing, their responsibilities. We're going to talk about measures of success. So when we start forming goals, board goals, we have things that are a little more measurable, and we understand we can explain why they're in place, what they're doing, and show how they're having that impact. Let's see. Oh, as everyone drove up, did you see our new sign? Yay, it's in process of being programmed, so very excited that it is in, so we're happy to see that. What else? Oh, we approved very exciting. We approved our first trip to France for a student trip that's happened since COVID, so they're getting back on track. We're happy to see that. And again, we went through our unreserved fund balance and default calculations. Thank you to everyone who worked on that and making some hard decisions and bringing it to us to talk through. So one last thing that I brought up briefly to everybody that I'd like to have a communication, it's not a committee, but the idea that we do need to start reaching out more to the town's people and meeting with them more frequently. So one of my thoughts was we could do things at the library once a month where we invite the public to come talk to us. It could be 2 people from each board. So there's not a quorum, but we get that communication going. So I'm probably going to reach out to Amherst so we can start at the Amherst board, and we need to get started at Mount Vernon as well so we can start reaching out to the Mount Vernon community. So that was one of my thoughts.
Thank you. Ms. Lawrence.
Good evening. We are having our organizational meeting tomorrow evening. Because of the timing of this meeting, we did not get to do that in advance. We do anticipate talking about our unexpended fund balance. We are reviewing our 6th graders transition from the village school to AMS. We plan also to have continued discussion on our middle school study committee and what that looks like going forward. And again, based on our prior conversations, having joint conversations with our colleagues in Amherst to continue that discussion. So that's our brief update from Mount Vernon. You'll have more next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. John.
Would you email Josh and Victoria and myself and Anna, who on your board is assigned to policy committee when you've made those assignments?
Sure.
Thanks.
I don't think it's going to be a surprise.
Would it be you and Jessica is anticipated? Is that right? Okay. Great. I mean, just so we know.
That's right. Any other comments? Great. Before we move on, if it's okay with you guys, I want to give an opportunity for our new board members to introduce themselves, starting off with Dan. And yes, we've had 3 meetings together. Both of them were, at the SAU office. But just if you can, just introduce yourself. Obviously, you are a state representative for the town of Amherst up in Concord. But tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're excited about working on the board with.
Dan Bayou. Dan Vayu, and I'm excited about just working with the board and getting through some of the issues that we've, been discussing. I'm excited about things like Jfac and the finance committee and things that I've been involved with in the past and things that I will look forward to being involved with in the future. And look forward to working with everybody here. We have a pretty good relationship, and I think things have been going pretty smoothly so far. Looking forward to going ahead with all this stuff.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Torres, you're a very familiar face to a lot of people, but you're now fulfilling a new role, defending the hill, I guess you could say.
So
Introduce yourself and what you're excited about.
Sure. So what's old is new again. So
Right.
I'm George Torres. I was a former AFC member, then member of the Sauhegan Cooperative for 3 years. Did have 2 older boys, worked through the system through Amherst, then through Sauhegan. But as I said, what's old is new again. Now I've been blessed with a 5-year-old. So it starts all over again. So now I'm in Mount Vernon. So really excited to immerse myself in the Mount Vernon community and looking forward to working with everyone. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And Anna.
So I'm Anna Goulet-Zimmerman. A lot of you know me because I've been coming to a lot of meetings. I'm very excited to be here. I am incredibly excited for the Sauhegan board. I love Sauhegan High School. It was a big part of the reason we moved here. There are, I think there's work to be done, but I have great faith in our board and our leadership and our school. And I'm just really excited to be part of hopefully moving it forward to its next steps and success. I have a daughter who's a senior here and graduating, who will be glad probably not to have her mother on the board for the last 3 years while she was here. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. As you all know, I have lots of opinions and I'm happy to share them, but I also really do value everyone else's input, opinions, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Mr. White.
My name is Jason White. I am on the Amherst School Board. Obviously live in Amherst. I've been a middle school public educator in Massachusetts since 2003. English and now doing special education. So I have a wide range of experience in education. Reason I wanted to get on the board is I'm hoping to kind of change some of the negative vibe in the community. I view public education as being exceptionally important, and everybody here is, we're all kind of doing the same thing, trying to do what's best for students, because not only is it important for our children, it's important for our whole society and our whole way of life in this country. And I really want to think of creative ways and listen to everybody so that we can fix whatever is wrong or is perceived to be wrong, so we can move forward in a healthy way as a boards and as a town and as a people.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing to do this, serve your communities in this way. And I think you're going to find it very rewarding over the course of the next year to actually 3 years of your term. And if there's anything that I think any other board member can do to help, transition you guys into a more successful board member, don't hesitate to ask. We all have open door policies. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. So thank you. Let's move on to the outstanding Jfac Committee with Ms. Gasquin.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here tonight to provide an update on the work of the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee and to request direction on next steps for the committee at large. I have a very brief presentation to guide our conversation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for me. I do not have a clicker, so you can just go ahead to the next slide. So many of you have served on the committee at one time or another or been present for one of our many board presentations. So much of this will simply be a review, but it may be new to some of you. In 2017, a sorely needed and inarguably overdue capital needs assessment of our existing buildings was conducted by the firm of Onsite Insight. This assessment looked at all of our major systems and outlined a replacement schedule and anticipated costs to maintain the facilities status quo, so simply maintaining what we have. At this same time, voters supported a request for architectural and engineering fees in the Sauhegan Cooperative School District to develop options for future renovations, enhancements, and repairs in this building. This effort was heavily student-led. At the same time, in the Amherst School District, Clark Wilkins and Amherst Middle School were experiencing a space crunch and issues with many systems at the end of their useful life. This was due to several factors: larger than anticipated enrollments in the early grades, increased special programming needs, deferred maintenance, a fire in the 14-year-old portable building at Wilkins, just to name a few. At the time, and it's worth noting at present, specialists are on carts, interventionists are quadrupled in classrooms, school psychologists are using closets for office and intervention space. Administrators share offices, and on any given day, you can walk in these buildings and find folks squatting all over the place to accommodate student needs. At AMS, leaks during every rain and snowmelt were commonplace, and the accordion-style walls of the 70s were falling off their hinges, requiring costly replacements. Wild temperature swings were and still are regularly reported by staff and students alike, impacting teaching and learning. It became very clear to the folks sitting around this table at an SAU meeting in 2018 that we were at a major tipping point with our buildings in Amherst. So for this reason, the boards came together and conceived of an advisory committee composed of community members, SAU administration and staff, and elected officials. They charged this group with analyzing the needs in Amherst, offering recommendations to the boards, including sequencing and priorities. The buildings in the Amherst School District rose to the surface as those with the most pressing needs, followed by Sauhegan High School. The first recommendation was for a study of the current facilities and development of options to fit our programs in the Amherst School District. The firm of LaValle Brensinger, who had recently completed Sauhegan 2.0, was hired to study the facilities and programs in ASD and develop options. In the Sauhegan Cooperative School District, the completed 2.0 plan included a number of upgrades and renovations. A Jfac subcommittee was formed to review the options and identify priorities within the plan. They worked closely with administration and board members to identify three priority areas to recommend to the board: a secure main entrance, science lab updates, and addressing HVAC issues. In Amherst, after reviewing a myriad of options, the recommendation was made for a new elementary school on the existing Wilkins site and a major renovation and small addition at AMS. If you could advance this slide, please. Thank you. The boards accepted the recommendations, and the committee spent the next years working to engage the community, refine the scope of the projects, and support the boards. And this is just a bulleted list of some of the work that the committee did. We had several subcommittees, and it really was a multifaceted, many moving parts with the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee. So we developed and maintained a website. This was all volunteer led. We had a wonderful community member in Amherst who built a website for us and gave us just enough information to upload it with data and keep it going. A social media presence on Facebook and Instagram, townwide mailers, we facilitated 6 community information sessions available with options for attendance both in person and online, and presented multiple times at multiple board meetings: Amherst, Sauhegan, Mount Vernon, SAU 39, planning board meetings, Board of Selectmen meetings, etc. That brings us to the present. If you could advance the slide, please. The first go on the ballot found all facilities articles defeated. This is not atypical for public infrastructure projects. It's a fairly well-established trend that these types of requests take several cycles to educate, inform, and gain voter support. This happens in part because with each cycle, community engagement increases and the project scope is continually tweaked to align with the needs, financial capacity, and values of the community. I cannot tell you tonight the exact reasons why these articles were defeated this year. However, I can offer you reflections from members of the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee and share with you that the next steps should include community listening sessions and surveys. So the Jfac has met once post-election, and during that meeting, we really just spent time reflecting on the ballot results. The phrase "a perfect storm" was uttered more than once during that meeting. The 3 main areas became a common theme for the boards to address and to really consider moving forward. The first issue is cost. In this year's storm, cost loomed heavy on all fronts. From the cost folks were seeing at the gas pump, the grocery store shelves, the increased operating budgets being requested, and the cost associated with major infrastructure projects. It was a lot. Additionally, the perception that the SAU and individual districts are running on bloated budgets took a stronghold, resulting in defeat. In order for future efforts to be successful, the community has to have a clear presentation that this is not the case. 2, mistrust. So I'm going to be really frank here. When we made our initial recommendations in 2020 and 2021, we fully expected cost would be a topic and something that we would have to deal with and address. What we didn't anticipate were issues of mistrust. At the time, the district was by all accounts very successfully weathering the COVID storm, and communication with the community seemed to be thoughtful and discourse respectful. As we approached the March ballot, however, March 2022 ballot, I should say, this relationship of mutual trust and respect quickly eroded. Repairing this will be critical for the success of future efforts for our public school infrastructure, and the onus is on the boards. While we offered a number of ways to engage with the Facilities Advisory Committee and the Amherst School Board, number 3 is community engagement. So while we offered a variety of ways, like I said, we had a website up and running for over a year. We had multiple social media sites. We held multiple community forums in a variety of formats. I literally sat on Zoom one night for 2 hours, kind of talking to myself and one other person who was there. We still didn't receive quite the audience participation and attendance that we were hoping for. So except for the Clark School Exploration Committee, I do believe those meetings were very well attended by the neighborhood there. But again, this is not atypical for the first cycle of a request like this, but moving forward, we must have greater participation and a greater variety of voices and ideas. So that brings me to our next slide. What are the recommended next steps? So first off, renew and update our committee charge. Like I said, we were initially formed in 2018. We've had a variety of members come in and out, but our charge has been fulfilled, and it would be time to give us some new direction. And once we receive that, we would organize and appoint new members. Individual boards should and are working on their facility plans, and I think we heard an update from Amherst tonight. And then community feedback. In the Amherst district, they have a community listening session scheduled for April 13th, and a survey that the Facilities Advisory Committee will provide input on will be going out soon. So an suggested charge is on the next slide. And again, this would need to be ratified at each individual board level, obviously. But here's just an idea of what the charge may be. So I'm not going to read it all. I will point to bullet number 2, which I think is important, an important role that the committee could potentially play, which is to provide a medium for the dissemination of facilities information, reports, and materials to the community relative to SAU 39 and its long-range facilities plans. It's a heavy lift. We just learned that leading up to March 22, trying to disseminate all of the information and all the different things, and to reach all of the community with all the work that we did. We still fell short in really having those meaningful conversations, and it wasn't, a lack of effort. So having a committee that could do that for the boards, I think would benefit you. So that's that. And then if you could go to the next slide. This would be a suggested structure, and I've talked with our director of facilities a little bit about this. He loves the idea of having a building and grounds committee for each of the schools. And so one idea could be that we would have, the larger Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, and that within each district there would be a building and grounds committee composed of the director of facilities, SAU and building leadership staff, community members, school board members, and we had a very dedicated Board of Selectmen liaison who attended just about every Facilities Advisory Committee meeting. So I would really like to publicly thank Selectman D'Angelo for his attendance at all of those meetings. And we would love greater participation and engagement from Mount Vernon as well. So that's all I have for you all this evening. But like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any feedback.
Thank you, Shannon. Any questions for Shannon? Yes, Ms. Clark.
I don't speak much, obviously, unless it's probably not appreciated. But I was actually wondering about, I know there was a lot of efforts to schedule conversations with the public. And I know, like, as a parent, sometimes the evenings are really challenging for me to be able to go to those sorts of things. And while I know that there are negative parts to it, but were there thoughts to doing like Facebook Live sessions? Were those utilized possibly?
Yeah.
I hadn't seen them, but maybe they were.
Sure. No, so that's a great question. And yes, not Facebook Live, but we did a lot of Zoom offerings, and we were very intentional when we scheduled the community sessions. We never held a session on the same date, time. So we had a Saturday afternoon, what is an option. We do a Monday night, and then the next month maybe we did a Thursday night, because a lot of folks have standing meetings, right, that are always on the same evening. So could we do more, better? Obviously we will need to, but we certainly made an effort to do that. Yeah. And we also produced a series of informational videos, just trying to reach people. It was a lot. It's a lot of information to kind of put into a few bullet points, but we clearly need to get there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a question over here? Ms. Grunt.
I think just looking at going forward, we need to meet as school boards and with Roger as our director of buildings and grounds first, and our building administration to understand what their priorities are for going forward. Again, we're going to need to coordinate or understand what Amherst school district is planning on doing for next year on the ballot. You know, we had our science labs. Is there going to be a rethink of usage of facilities that could impair what we originally put on the ballot? So I think there is a coordination that needs to happen. It needs to happen quickly. But I want to make sure our building administrators are involved and it's not just us in that discussion box, and make sure our administrators are brought in as school board members. I'm going to do that quick.
Could you pull up the mandate request up on the screen again, that slide? I'm wondering, Stephanie, if the mandate tonight could be granted and then having Jfac serve as the repository of that discussion, right? And so Amherst and Sauhegan and hopefully Mount Vernon participating in conversations through Jfac. I don't know if you guys would feel that that would be the appropriate approach, because when we've got that up there, I mean, the mandate, this is the ask, right, Shannon? For us to sort of adopt this tonight and get you guys, so you guys can then form, appoint, the leadership and then start to engage the various boards. Because, obviously time is short, right? And so we don't want to wait until May or June or July to act upon this. The collaboration piece under number 3, Stephanie, would that be something that would accomplish that concern?
We definitely need the director of facilities, but I think because there's, we had newish administration in our school, and now they've had time to establish themselves and have some forward-looking things that when we have our board retreat, we need to understand what are their facility needs. Like, I'm sure Mike has had thoughts over the past year of, God, this was designed here as like Sauhegan 2.0, but I'm thinking something else needs to happen over here, and we haven't had that conversation yet. So even though that includes the director of facilities and grounds, we need to make sure our board has had that hard conversation with our administration even first, and then be able to bring that to the joint facility committee so we can discuss what the priorities are.
And on the next,
I guess what it is I just don't want everyone to kind of keep fitting in the priorities. And, we came this year, $83 million bond. We had the $500,000 thing all at the same time. We were trying to avoid it, happened anyway. We need to figure out, like, I don't want to wait, but we need to understand priorities. So it's going to be a tricky balance. So yes, we need to go collaborate going forward, but we can't forget our administration.
John.
I think there is an important role for Jfac. Interesting to add Mount Vernon into the mix. We've not really heard from Mount Vernon about what their needs are, how they might leverage this. Not for or against, it's just new information. I think we just organized, and Mount Vernon will tomorrow. I think the individual boards need their own time to huddle up and contemplate this charge before we assign the charge. It all sounds fine, but it's like I haven't even actually read every word of it. It's going through so fast. So to adopt something that I would appreciate, and I think all of us would, if we thought about it, time to think about what is the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee going to do? What's the best use of their time? How could they best serve the community? And I would recommend we pause tonight, and maybe you could deliver this to us so we can see the language and mull it independently, bring it back to our next board members meetings, and really have an earnest conversation about that. Because I want you to be successful.
Absolutely. And just to be clear on my part, if we leave with the charge tonight, fantastic, we'll hit the ground running. But certainly take the time needed to give us that direction.
We might be saying the
I
same
think
thing.
we're saying the same thing. So at our Amherst School Board meeting, we have decided that we need to continue our work on facilities. So the way that I view the Amherst facility group, we've appointed a couple people who are going to focus on the facilities. We're moving forward with looking at our ideas and things like that. I view Jfac as a conduit for all of us to be able to talk without all of us needing to be together. We've already spoken with our building administration, so needing more time for us isn't necessary. That being said, we have a deadline for state building aid, which is July 1st. So in order for us to give our SAU employees enough time to really fill out a meaningful application, our goal is to come back at our May 2nd meeting and have our discussion about what our plan is to move forward. So we are moving forward on a rather quick timeline for Amherst. So that's just kind of where we're coming from. But when it comes to Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, that, a new charge is probably in our best interest. Also, after sitting on that committee and discussing with the Director of Facilities, Roger Preston, his interest not only in these building needs, but moving forward and having people from the community be part of that Building and Grounds Committee who come in and really understand the way that our buildings are almost like living pieces for our students and staff is something that he's excited about. So fulfilling, I think it was on one of those other slides of those little boxes, including the Building and Grounds is something that the Facility Committee was excited to be able to bring forth for Roger.
Thank you. And Christy, did you have your hand up? Oh, Sarah.
I'm very excited that Mount Vernon has the opportunity to participate. So thank you for that inclusion. My wonder and worry a little bit is that it can be very challenging to get participation from our community on committees in Mount Vernon. So having an additional committee in addition to our middle school study committee might be a heavy lift for our community at this time. I can't say that people wouldn't be interested in participating, but with the way that our board has been able to work with Roger and the administration, our buildings and grounds we feel pretty confident with that. So I don't know if there might be another way for Mount Vernon to be able to participate without necessarily having to form another separate smaller committee. So that might be just a suggestion based on the lifting that we're able to do up the hill with our time commitments. But certainly speaking for myself and not the other board members, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to connect and collaborate. Thank you.
George.
So just so I can get some clarity here, so the committee, Jfac, was initially formed in 2018, is that correct? So forgive me, but why wouldn't, maybe I'm not understanding, why wouldn't the Jfac be a going concern? Shouldn't we always be reviewing our facilities on a going basis rather than having to charge a committee? Because to me, it's maybe I'm not following or maybe I'm not seeing it, but why wouldn't we be constantly reviewing our facilities? Why do we need to set up a committee and charge them? Well, you need to look at this for a finite period of time. We should be looking not only now, but next year, for the next 5 years and 10 years when I'm no longer here. Or so I guess I'm not following.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just give you my answer and then Mr. Steele can give his. What we're really looking for is just a renewed charter. So this is a new board. Obviously, we've had several new boards since 2018. The initial sort of push for the committee was to look across the district because we did have districts working in silos and all these needs were like rising to the surface. So I'm really here tonight basically to just get we want you all to keep going. We need new membership. We need some new voices and new perspectives. And before we launch into the community asking for more voices and new perspectives, I want to make certain that we're not running a fool's errand and that this is indeed what the boards would like us to continue doing. Did you have another answer?
That was great. So the two things I would add would be that the committee's charge is the Jfac is a subcommittee of the SAU board. It was established by vote of the SAU at the time. And so that charge does not go away unless rescinded by the SAU board. So what she's asking for tonight is really a blessing to continue moving with the charge that already exists. And so I want to be clear about that. The second is a Joint Facilities Advisory Committee was born out of what some folks have mentioned, that there were competing projects, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, and we've heard. And the point is to act as one, which was a result of our many years long other study that we did jointly, looking at consolidation. What was the other word that we used for?
Reconfiguration.
Thank you. So the Jfac is an attempt to do that. Similar to the policy committee, where not every policy matches every board perfectly, but many of them often can be exactly, it's meant to be a way to try to streamline things.
So just so I understand, because I'm a little dense sometimes, especially at this late hour. It's been a long day. So their charge or they remain a going concern until we rescind that, is what I'm understanding.
Correct. Any subcommittee of a standing board or school board exists until it's when it was founded, it didn't have a date certain that it would dissolve. And it's subject to the right to know law, just as the SAU board is subject to all of those things because it's a subcommittee of the board.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Any more quick, Ms. Clark?
I'm going to get good this by the night. Just really quick. So something I was thinking about was that I think one of the contributing factors was a little bit of confusion between what the Amherst residents thought, the Mount Vernon residents thought, and what they thought. There was a lot of, right? And I think that this really addresses some of that.
That was
And in terms of the community engagement piece, there's so much opportunity there. Like a lot of my work is involving like recruitment of underserved populations, like hard to reach groups. So there's a lot of ways to like optimize and identify what works and doesn't work so that you can try something and then renegotiate your time because people are donating their time, right? So I think like really a honed in and data focused discussion on that could reduce some burden and also increase engagement. So I don't know if that's something I'm allowed to like, I can send you an email or something and chat more, but there's a lot of opportunities there, I think.
Great, thank you.
That you volunteered to join in?
I'm not, I don't.
I am happy for referrals.
I'll take it.
Thank you, Kristen. Ms. Grunt, Mr. Vega.
Mr. Vega had something to say first.
Very good.
I just want to say that I agree that I would like to take time and meet as a board to see how we can be more involved through Sauhegan in Jfac and try to see if we can better utilize the space that's available throughout the district, throughout the SAU, in every district. I do agree with George that it should be an ongoing consideration, and it's a great way of keeping maintenance and school needs, facilities needs on the front burner. But we'd also need to do more than just put forward, keep pushing the same idea that we put forward last year. I would like to see Jfac look at more creative alternatives. We still have that plan, no matter what we come up with over the next year. But if we can come up with some creative ideas and take better advantage of some of the space that we think is available and involve the building administrators in seeing what we can do with master plans and room utilization and see if we can take better advantage of some of the space, that would be a great idea. And I think we had some question about how Mount Vernon was going to respond, that we probably want to involve them a little more and see how the committee is thinking and what the recommendations are going to mean to the ultimate decision makers up there. So that's my thoughts on it.
Awesome. Ms. Grunt, and then.
So the clarification, I guess I want to understand, because I think this is what got a little maybe frustrating on some parts, maybe for me, is the idea that the boards create their plans, how much they need to put into their capital needs. And if, Amherst, is it up to the board to decide whether you go forward with a new school, go forward with looking at different alternatives, utilizing the annex, throw it out there, whatever? Or is it going to be Jfac that does those analysis and push it to the board? Which direction is going to be the responsible party that brings it either to Jfac, or is Jfac going to come up with the ideas and push it down to the boards? Because I think that needs to be clarified, because I think it got a little frustrating, I think, for me on Sauhegan. I felt like Sauhegan just had to deal with whatever was kind of worked out at Jfac, versus can we as a board really should be driving our own needs and then bring it to Jfac and then maybe work out timing. But I think we need to work out.
I think that's a great point. And from my perspective, chairing the committee, there was certainly a difference in the communication we received from the boards and the direction. Amherst was more direct with what they wanted and needed. And I don't know that we had that same, and I think probably it overtook, it was a larger ask and a larger need and project. But I think clarifying that would really impact success moving forward. Yeah.
So Shannon, I don't hear a lot of consensus for issuing the mandate tonight, right?
Mhm.
So is there a way that you guys can still operate over the course of the next month and then come back to us next month?
I mean, from my perspective as the committee chair, and there's other members in the room, so feel free to chime in. Beyond the state aid application, which the Amherst School Board is handling on their own, we don't really have any work to do until the boards are at a place where they're ready. So when you're ready, then I think that's the charge goes out and we organize and move forward. Like your boards have an organizational meeting that needs to happen at Jfac as well. We need a new membership. We need different voices and it could be time to shift some folks around to other things.
Yeah, I just feel it's important to clarify that the state building aid application is based on a particular project. So it's not just a blanket application. And so that if the project changes, then that is something that I would need to know because all of the documentation is based on that particular project.
And so by waiting until May, you're literally left with 45 days to get something submitted? Okay.
Yeah, the applicant, it's due July 1.
Okay.
So, and we discussed this in Amherst and discussed it with Victoria that May was a reasonable time period to be able to complete that. But if we start getting into June, it's going to get difficult.
Okay. John.
What project is on the table for state aid next year? I mean, no warrants passed except for surplus warrants. So, and we have capital improvements that are being done on a rolling basis. Is that what you're talking about? Is state aid might pay for some of the capital improvements that's already baked into the trust fund?
No. Nope, this is for the building project. So on January 1, we submitted a letter of intent to the Department of Education to apply for state building aid for this project. And July 1, the actual application is due.
For the project that didn't pass?
Correct.
And it's not a prerequisite that you have a voter approval?
No, it's a nope.
Oh.
So the typical timeline, and you can take a look on the state website that outlines the process, is typically you would be submitting your letter of intent in January, and then you would be submitting your application in July, and then it would go to the voters next March. We were preempting that by trying to do that a year early. If we were awarded, then we would have needed to wait until July 2023 in order to start building construction. So we're following actually the more typical path by submitting the application this July.
Gotcha. I mean, I don't know that anyone in this room can say whether or not, I mean, Tom said it as much. There's been no decisions made on what plans are or what projects may or may not be put forward next year. I mean, it's unfortunate that the time is so compressed. I don't know that we'll get there. I mean, to be able to reflect on what happened, to be able to look at the beginnings of what Jfac has looked, to be able to include Mount Vernon and incorporate all of that. I don't have a lot of confidence that will be possible.
Can I add my 2 cents, Mr. Chair? I'm sorry, John,
No, that's it. Just with some fidelity and with some vigor and with some confidence that yes, this is going to be that's basically what you're saying. You're going to put time and resources and I don't know how rigorous this application is, probably very extensive. And then I'll come to find out at some point in time in the future that, well, actually, no, we've some creative thinking, like Dan was saying, we're going to utilize our existing space. We're going to do something else to serve the students' needs today and maybe a lot less cost. Oh, well, maybe that's really attractive. Maybe that picks up some steam. I don't know where it's going to go. I think that's part of where the problem we have, and just go for it and let's, go forward with this idea. We're just not there yet. I think a lot of us are still coming together as boards. I mean, we haven't had any time to have a communication about this except for Sauhegan for last night and tonight. That's it. We can't talk about this behind the scenes right? We'll violate right to know. There's no communication about this in emails. There's no back and forth. There's no noodling. This is it. This is the first time. And now it's like, oh my goodness, we're going to have a July 1, make this huge decision. And I mean, I don't know. I just don't see it with confidence.
So if I can, for a brief history of building aid in New Hampshire, it used to be back when, and going back to when Bow High School, Campbell High School, and Bedford High School were built at the turn of the millennium, that building aid, the process was, we think we're going to build a building. Here's our general idea. We haven't spent much money yet on designing it. State, will you approve it? State says, yes, we'll approve it. And the law at the time was every building project got 30% at a minimum paid for by the state on an annual basis, 30% of their principal of their bond payment ad infinitum. Wyndham High School came down the pike and changed all that because Wyndham is still getting $1 million a year in building aid. At least I still think they're getting $1 million a year in building aid, which has rankled some folks across the state. And so the building aid program was changed about the time that and I always get the acronym wrong, ARA, not COVID-related funds. There was a Obama era general works program. Pardon me? Yes, thank you. And the idea was that shovel-ready projects were the only ones that would be approved. Well, to be shovel-ready means you've spent $1 million, $2 million on architectural and engineering fees to get shovel-ready. Our state attempted for a while to adopt that when building aid was removed from the biannual budget. Now it's sort of a hybrid where the state wants to know July 1, which is the biennium before even the next session has begun. Elections are this November for the next 2-year cycle of legislators, but the Legislative Budget Office through the Department of Education wants to have a forecast of all the projects that could come down the pike during that budget creation process, even though that budget isn't set for another whole entire year typically. So the DOE has an arbitrary deadline that they give to us that's arbitrarily given to them by the LBO, as far as I understand it, and someone else in the room might know better than I. And so that leaves us having to try to prognosticate. We might have a project that comes down the pike, but in no way is it a commitment that this is the project we're going to have. So it's everything you said is 100% accurate. We have no idea. We have no consensus. It's 11 months until our next election. Who knows what's going to be the plan? What we have is a requirement to provide our best prognostication to the DOE by July 1, whether it's accurate or not, with the understanding that during the legislative budget process, there'll be updated information that's garnered and gathered and goes into the development of our legislators when they make their budget. I hope that helps. And Mr. Vayu, please add to that or correct my understanding.
So if, told you it's a long day. So what happens is this is a little bit of putting the cart in front of the horse. And what happens is with a lot of these projects, I know when we go in for funding, let's say to put in mains in Nashua, and we'll apply for SRF funding, which is state revolving funding. Now, you apply for the funding before you actually do the project. And the reason for that is there's only a fixed amount of funds available. And what they do is you want to be the first one to put these applications in because they get graded. So depending on how you grade out, obviously if you grade better than other districts, you'll get the funding first. And depending on that grade, you'll be eligible for forgiveness. What probably happens here is if we don't put in the application, even though we don't know, we forego any availability of those funds. So if we, God willing, we get approval from our constituents to go ahead with this project, then the funds are available. If we don't apply for it and we get approval, we're out of it. So it behooves us to go in, even though we don't have any cost certainty of what it's going to be. And I'll guarantee you, if we go in the same project, it's going to be more than $83 million right now. Guaranteed. We've seen it. All our costs have gone up about 15%. So I'll guarantee we're either going to have to change the scope or that cost is going up. And they were saying last year, I remember, it gets more expensive every year. Well, now you can add exponential factor. And you could thank Russia, you could thank China, you could thank whoever you want, but it's only good. I won't be shocked if it'll be over $100 million. for that faint. So basically, that's why we have to go in, because even though we're not sure, we won't get it if we don't apply.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all that. I mean, so what do you need to know? I mean, you just put in a number, you say, yep, we did some looks, we have space problems, here's an idea, bang, done, do it. I mean, why don't you do it tomorrow? I mean, not literally tomorrow, but what more information is needed? Yeah.
It's a vast application. It's all of the information that we've been working on for the project.
Right,
Included in this application.
right,
So
right,
I'm not slapping a number on a piece of paper.
right, okay.
The last couple years of work and everything we've done with the architects and the construction.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
It's not like applying for a car loan.
right.
which is why you
They're
can't simply
very-
swap it out because there are details
Yeah.
that they require.
They want to,
that you
yeah,
don't
because
have.
based on their grading, they have to know the exact scope of the project. Because again, like if we wanted to, okay, I'll use Amherst for an example. If we compare Amherst to Manchester, I'll guarantee if we were going to submit a project for Amherst, it would not grade as well as Manchester. Just because of the constituents in Manchester versus the constituents in Amherst. Unfortunately, there's a difference there. So I would say their project will probably get better priority, but if they don't file and we do, sorry, because there's only a fixed amount of dollars
Right.
that's available.
I get that. So we put all this architectural information, and I get that. It's arduous. It's very detailed. It's very specific. And then, let's just say it's $80 million. It's a number 100, pick a number, right? Okay. And then we noodle with Jfac and we come up with a $20 million, right? That has nothing to do with building a new school. I'm just putting the hypothetical out there. And then, but that application can be amended to say, oh, actually, here's what we're doing. And we're still okay with that. I mean, if that's the case, then I'd say, yeah.
So it happens around the state. I mean, we're not the only community to wrestle with. Hampstead's put forward a facilities project, I forget how many years in a row before it finally passed. So I think the point is to give fair warning to the legislature through the DOE so they can make reasonable assumptions about the potential debt load and how it might affect the state budget. That's the purpose.
All right. Well, I mean, I wouldn't stand in the way of that at all.
And so, sure.
Probably until this gets approved, we should do it every year. Every year. That's the only way you're going to guarantee that those funds are going to be available, if they even give it to you. Because if you don't put it in, they say, oh, well, we still don't know, let's not put it in. No, you can't operate that way. If we're thinking we're going to do this, you put it in there. The worst they can say is no. Yeah, it's some work on administrative staff, albeit, but I think, don't worry. We'll take you out to dinner.
And so a question. I guess a final question.
Lots of dinners, but anyway.
Our inaction of giving you guys a mandate, is that going to in any way interfere with your ability to do that?
The assumption is that we're going to file the building aid application as is, as if the same project was going to move forward, with the full knowledge that there's going to be significant work by the board, the community, the Jfac.
Okay.
And the final result might be drastically different.
Okay. So
Could be.
if it's okay with you guys, why don't we hold off on issuing the mandate, allowing the individual boards to discuss this at their board level, and then coming back here in our May meeting to use your sample language that hopefully you can distribute out to everyone tonight, and then craft that and see if that's something that we can actually move forward with. Is that going to be acceptable?
I just want to clarify that Jfac would be able to help the Amherst board recruit community members who are interested and things like that between now and that next timetable that you're
Yeah, I
talking
have
about.
received a couple of interested
Oh, yeah. So
emails from community members. So
the committee has.
I just want to make sure we don't
So there was no.
that's my point.
There was no end date to that committee when we authorized it, right?
Perfect.
It's to really craft and create a structure to this conversation. So it's just a matter of giving you guys a new mandate so you know what the mission is going forward. So when you do recruit new individuals to participate in the process, that they're aware of what the new mandate is. It's not a continuation of the old, it's a new sort of path forward. So, and I think based on what I'm hearing, I think it is acceptable that we just wait until May before we do that after there's more direct conversation at the individual board level, because it sounds like it's not going to interfere with anything. Is that okay?
Can I ask one question before
Yes.
we leave the subject? So, and I'm completely confused, but that's okay because we don't have time to deal with all of it. Because I would have sworn at the meetings I went to, I just kept hearing again and again, we have to approve this. This has to be approved by the board. And then we go to the state and then we'll find out if there's going to be a contribution or not. So when we're talking about trust and we're talking about messaging, if we're going to apply for I have no idea, what is the state giving on aid? Because I thought they basically cut out aid in the last like 4 years. I mean, does anyone know? I mean, are they, because they're not doing the 30%
Nope.
anymore.
It's a need-based system. It seems to be adjusted with every 2-year budget cycle.
Okay. So we should just be clear that we're not moving ahead with an $83 million project that just got voted down. And that we are putting something in place so that we stay in line. And if there are funds available, we'll have it for whatever that end project looks like, because this all sounds very different than what I understood it when I was sitting on the other side of the table and going to the informational sessions as far as how the funding worked.
So I think what was said and is true at the informational sessions is that when the question was asked, what will we get in aid? Well, we can't tell you until the project is approved and we have a number. That is true. And that's not contradictory to what was just said. The application though still has to be put in advance. Correct. And until voters approve it, then we don't get the funds. So we still have to get in line.
We put in the application and get told, yes, potentially you've been approved for $20 million. So that's a good thing. I mean,
It is.
ideally we should have been doing this.
But
2 years
this,
ago.
but this year we wouldn't have known. So when we were telling voters this year, we wouldn't be able to tell them. We wouldn't have been able to tell them.
I understand.
Right.
It's just a different,
years-
it's a
Right,
different
I understand what
message.
you're saying.
And it would be
Correct.
really nice to be able to go to them in the future and say, this is what we know is going to happen. So the ask is actually 60% less.
Sure.
In
So-
reality, I think the state's probably going to give us nothing. So this is probably an academic discussion, but
We're going to go to Victoria, George, and then we're going to wrap it up. So
Yep.
Victoria.
So it's a 2-year cycle. So when we were looking at this 2 years ago, or I guess it would be a year and a half ago, however it was, looking to apply in the last cycle, we didn't have the information ready that needed to be included in the application. So the application includes things like the construction management information and the architect information. So by having the architect and engineering fees included from the Amherst district, and now we have that, tangible information to include into our application, we couldn't have applied before we had that information. Now that we have it, it's a 2-year cycle. So essentially you get 2 chances. If your timing is right, you get 2 chances to put it in front of your constituents before finding out if you actually get it or not.
Thank you. George.
Just the last thing to add, that even if we do get approved, we don't have to accept it. So we're not bound in almost like accepting a loan. So there really isn't a negative not doing it. The only one I could see is if we are consistently applying for it and not accepting the funds, then the following year our grading gets lower, because the likelihood is, yeah, they got accepted, it's a worthwhile project, but the town isn't going to, so they're going to go on to the next town. So that's the one issue that you may run into.
Great. Thank you, George. So Shannon, if it's okay with you,
That's great.
come back in May.
Sure.
And hopefully we can engage in dialogue at the individual board levels and about participation. If you can just forward that one paragraph in an email to me. I know I have the link.
Oh,
but,
Yeah, I'll,
you-
so you just want
Yep.
that. Yep, no
All right,
problem.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, moving on to the superintendent's reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be brief. I had nothing written in the packet, but I wanted to update the board specifically around COVID-19, the thing that we've probably least want to talk about. We're in status blue for the first time in a couple of years, which is great. Things are essentially normal throughout our schools. I do want to caution that we're likely to have another increase in cases coming in our direction based on some of the early indicators that we've seen. Specifically, we're always 6 weeks behind Western Europe, and believe it or not, wastewater tracking is one of the best early indicators and early warning signs. And Boston has been a good bellwether for us, and that's been ticking up lately. I will share, though, if you're not aware, that with the governor's change in directions and then the Commissioner of Education's fiat, it's unlikely that even if we wanted to mask students again in any required way, that we would be successful if challenged. And so I just wanted to update the board that while we will still track and do what we need to do and make recommendations, it's unlikely that we will again attempt to make a mask mandate unless something at the state level changes. So I just wanted to give the board opportunity to hear that. I think what would likely happen, and it is likely to happen somewhere in the state. If another wave of COVID occurs, some school district is probably going to say we're going to require masks. There will be a legal showdown about it, and we'll see what happens. I don't think we want to be that district, but that's my read of the situation. So that's my COVID-19 update. It is springtime. People are outside quite a bit. Walking around our schools the last couple of weeks, they really do feel quite normal, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So that's my superintendent's report for today, but would be happy to answer any questions about any topics.
Any questions? Stephanie?
Actually, one of the questions right now. Emergency policy on personal protective measures is a policy, including wearing masks. We need to rescind that policy as well as the remote learning issues too. We have to go to the whole reopening task force document and basically rescind it.
Yeah, my recommendation is that emergency policy exists until you rescind it. My suggestion would be that over the summer, with your interim superintendent, you evaluate whether that policy needs to be revised, changed, reenacted, rescinded, what have you. I think the next couple of months will be pretty telling because, I'm not an expert, and I try to say it every time we talk about these things. If another increase in cases occurs locally, I think one of two things will happen. Either it will be treated like the common cold or flu, where people kind of are like aware of it, but it doesn't really rise to the level of causing community concern like it has in the last 2 years, or the opposite, where the concern will raise again and there'll be more public discourse and debate about it. And so I think it will become self-evident over the summer whether that policy has become stale and is no longer necessary, or whether it needs to be revised and perhaps changed in some way. So I think it's likely that over the summer, your SAU board meeting in August, you should have a discussion about that policy specifically. But I think you won't know until the summer comes.
What about the reopening task force document though? Because that has all the color codes and when masks are required and we can't require them anymore. So that probably needs to.
Correct. I think that document should be revised either way and brought forward in the August meeting for approval for the next school year.
We can't change color codes right now because.
Correct. We're
conflict, no matter what.
green and blue are the only things that are available to us in general. So there are other things and other mitigations factors besides masks in that reopening document that still can be considered. But you're right. I don't think masks are one that we can consider.
I go back to what we talked about last August, that to me, if the mask thing is out with the state, then this policy is really null and void. In fact, you brought it up in our meeting in August that we should just rescind this policy to begin with, because if masks are the only thing that we have any control over, the other stuff is not a big deal. You don't let volunteers in, you restrict who can come in for lunches. So I would like to make a motion that we rescind this policy tonight, along with that opening guidelines, because to me, it's a moot point at this juncture that we can't enforce it. And what's the point of having this policy on the docket? And I also think that if you try to enforce this again, you try to go back to that before the end of the school year, you are going to see a tremendous amount of anger in the community.
So that was a motion.
I would make that motion, yeah.
Motion has been made by Mr. Gothier. Second?
Second for discussion.
Second for Ms. Peters. For discussion. Ms. Grant?
I think that emergency policy, if it says that it's required, we have to rescind it. I think the reopening document might be worth revising quickly versus just rescinding the whole thing. Maybe we can revise it quickly to keep in the parts of volunteers no longer coming in the school, things like keep those parts in, but take out all those things that we're not allowed to do. Can it be revised quickly?
But do we even need that though? I mean, aren't the teachers and the administration at this point, and the SAU administration and building leaders, aren't they equipped with the ability to do that? I mean, it's a school building. They can close it down at any point for any reason. They don't need to have this policy in place. I mean, unless I'm mistaken about that, but I know that the schools aren't just this random public park where you can walk in and walk around because you're a taxpayer at any point during the day.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair. So superintendent has a lot of duties and responsibilities. One of them is not typically deciding when the public's allowed to access the building and when they aren't. Usually there's other policies that are specific to that. And outside of a pandemic, it would be an awkward situation for a superintendent to say to a parent, you're not allowed to attend because I believe that there's an issue here. Whereas right now the policy gives that authority in this specific instance to the superintendent to do that. So I think you either need a different policy, or if you rescind it, to essentially say that you might have to come back to it and reenact a new policy down the road if something flares up in the future.
That's
Either,
fair.
it's up to the board's discretion.
Mr. Glover.
Yeah, I just want to be clear when there's a policy that says we can do something that becomes something that we can't do by law, that provision becomes null and void, but it doesn't null and void the policy. So the policy that is adopted now still references governor orders from the early stages of the initial shutdown. That's what our policy says today. Okay. I wrote a policy that modernized it last year. It's been sitting in wallowing in policy committee for months. That policy that I wrote now also needs to be updated again because the facts and circumstances have changed. The rules and regulations have changed. The guidance from public health agencies has evolved. Okay, so this policy should be updated. It says in the policy it will be reviewed on a quarterly basis. We haven't been doing that. That said, there are things in there. You're right. You can't do the mask, but that mask is only one mitigation strategy. There's a whole bunch of other ones, including excluding people from the buildings, like the superintendent just said. I think it might be a bit premature to just abandon it, but rather keep it, do what we can do, and not violate the law, not enrage our constituents, and hone it to make it to the current state of affairs.
Ms. Clark. And then
I would agree that rescinding it is not the wisest choice. Just because the governor's decisions have changed currently does not mean they may not change again, or that public health recommendations may change again. As we know, this is mutated, and that different clinical profile changes with every mutation. And we need the flexibility that we were allowed in this policy to be able to make the correct mitigation strategies. I think an amendment and adjusting it to reflect the current policies from the state are most appropriate, but I'm not in favor of entirely rescinding the policy.
I don't know that we have to do anything. And I say that because I'm quickly looking at the policy, and it says specifically the duration. This policy is temporary based on a health emergency. This policy shall remain in place until such time as the governor rescinds his emergency order, modifies his order to eliminate the face mask recommendation, or the board determines that there's no longer substantial risk that unmasked persons will present a hazard to themselves or others in the school setting. And so if the first two of those have happened, that part is like it was John who mentioned a minute ago, is basically already voided. And so instead of just, I don't know, it just seems like without having some thought, because I literally just looked at this, we shouldn't just wipe out the whole thing. I think we ought to come back, revisit it, and see what needs to be amended. But I don't think we've got a problem being contrary to the emergency orders, since it's got its own sunset provision built in.
And the rescind the motion, because I don't disagree with that. If we
We have, there's a reason to keep, what was that? Yeah, I'll rescind that motion then.
I rescind my second.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for the superintendent? Ms. Grunt.
Regarding the enrollment memo in there, I know we're going to have further discussions, but can I just ask a question? Like, where did the data come from that they used, and where did they get any underlying, like, future information to come up with their statistical projections?
I can answer that very succinctly. I have no idea. We gave them our current and past enrollment data, but in terms of how they forecast, their secret sauce is something they keep closely guarded.
Statistical calculation that we gave them.
No, we're not sure what all they pull. I can tell you that in going back a long ways, the School Board Association used to do enrollment projections, and NASDAQ sort of cornered the market about 10, 12 years ago, and they're really the only organization I know of that still does it. NASDAQ's projections get better with time. So in my opinion, while this is probably somewhat accurate, it will be the least accurate of all of their projections because they will revise each year and their algorithm seems to get better over time. That's been my past experience at other places.
Any other questions? Yep, Ms. Priest.
I just wanted to comment. We talked about the enrollment projections at the Amherst meeting, and I just want to thank you for the actual data here from NASDAQ that we have. One piece that I thought was a little bit interesting to make sure that everybody kind of hears this concept is in the Amherst district, there is a chart that shows the birth to kindergarten relationship. And obviously, numbers going forward will get better with time, but this is actual numbers. So from 2006 to about 2010, for the births from 2006 to 2010, they're showing a close relationship between the births and the kindergarten enrollment. And then after that point, we're showing more of a separation, which shows more people who are not having their babies in Amherst, but who are moving to Amherst. So it was really nice to see some of this information and realize that this is exactly what the Amherst district has been feeling for a little while. And then I did follow some of that up to Sohegan, and it does show that those same cohorts are coming over to Sohegan. So it's nice to have it on paper from a qualified source to be able to share.
Thank you. Anything else? Great, seeing none, let's move on. Christine, you're supposed to present on board policy committee stuff. Is there someone else that's going to be presenting that tonight, or can we table that?
So we can table it, or she provided a document in the packet. I'm happy to answer questions if you'd like.
Sure. Anyone have any questions about Christine's proposal? Mr. Wells?
Not a question. It looks like a memorialization of information we've already heard. The only bit that I push back on a little bit is on the requested board action that board members review and provide feedback on the FY23 G policies no later than May 1st. It's unrealistic. It's a lot of policies. We're only meeting now. This is less than 1 month. I mean, before the end of the fiscal year, or maybe more importantly is once the policy committee has had a chance to meet and break this down into bite-sized chunks, then we can inform you, okay, here's the 10 that we're going to get to, provide your feedback by Friday. And then you can nibble on that. And then it'll be another 10 and you can nibble on that. We can chip away at this so that no one person is faced with this daunting task of reviewing every single policy in less than a month.
I think that's fair feedback. The G policies are.
There are a lot, and a lot of them are Sohegan only. So because that's where all of the PPC, that's where our labor agreements essentially reside. So, anyway, so that would be my only comment on this policy schedule.
Ms. Lawrence.
So as a member of the policy committee and likely
Presumably.
Well, as a member currently, because we haven't
touche.
re-met to reestablish, I can say that, this was just discussed as a way to reorganize so that we could more appropriately handle the policies. And part of that discussion also was to be able to give the board members adequate time to be able to begin to review. So just knowing that this is the schedule, you have a heads up to begin looking at that. And then I think part of the idea would be to have each individual board task its members potentially with kind of like we do in the policy committee, John, where we take certain policies, not all policies, but take certain policies as our responsibility and then come back and report to our individual boards who then could report back to the policy committee with that feedback. So that was my understanding of the intention behind that, because it is a heavy lift. The G policies are big, and for Sohegan in particular, it would be a bigger lift than most.
One thing I would like to stress that the G policies that apply to Sohegan only, I want to make sure Sohegan has the biggest input on those, and that we there are members from other school boards and policy committee, but if they apply to Sohegan only, I want to be clear that it really is a Sohegan policy.
Stephanie, I will go on a limb and I will do something very generous. I won't read those at all.
So
And things could change too, anyway, come May.
Stephanie, I think like Sarah said, we do assign policies to individuals. So I think whoever the chair is, I would encourage them to assign those policies to the Sohegan members so they lead those policies and then bring them to the rest of the committee. So I think we can work with that for sure.
Ms. Peters.
Sorry. Hasn't stopped me from talking yet. I just had a question on the two that we just passed in February. Is there a need to actually review those, or are they just here in this list because that's where we are putting them, the GBEB and the GBEBB?
Just every G policy was
Everything's
listed
just there, but we don't
as a
have
matter
to
of
talk about
course.
that anymore, right? Thank you.
Well, hold on. It's part of the lettering 5-year, 7-year cycle. So that one would likely say, oh, we just noodled on this. We just passed it. No action taken, and check it off the box and move on. But you have to keep it in the list so that you're complete.
Great. Any other questions? All right, let's move on. Next one is going to be the draft read for policy GBK for our first read. Now, our policy leadership is no longer with us. Does somebody want to take that conversation?
So as a new policy member, is there an option to say, I mean, I don't know what, I'm not sure exactly what first read means. Is there an option to say, can we table this and send it back to the policy committee? And let me tell you my general issue with it. When I read through it a little like I would a statute, and we've got at the top definitions of concerns, complaints, and grievances. But then we get into the body of it, and it's no dispute, it's no personnel issue. I mean, there's different texts in different locations, which really, it really needs to be consistent throughout. And I think I can help with that, and we should help with that. And so that would be my recommendation.
Okay, is that a motion to table?
Motion to table GBK and send it back to the policy committee.
Great, second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Glover.
Yeah, welcome to the inconsistent language that's replete through our policies. Been working for a number of years now to iron that out. Yes, Sarah? And get consistent language and consistent definitions. And we can talk about that offline. This, just to put in people's heads, this policy, the one problem fundamentally that I have with it is in step 4 of the grievance process, it has language about how does a grievance come to the board level, which and it's got this language if the employee is entitled to a hearing. Well, that made sense before we made a policy that said all staff are subject to the New Hampshire Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct rules. Okay, it used to only be certified staff. We made this applicable to all. So if you have that burden against you in your job duties, then it's very questionable about whether or not you shouldn't also be entitled to a hearing if your grievance process rises to the level where it needs to enter the board level. That's something we need to discuss. We could discuss it at policy, but that's, if you're going to put the burden on, then you need to give the exit. Otherwise, if you don't provide that exit to the board, then you might be finding yourself in municipal court. And that shouldn't be we should be the last forum before you have to seek some redress in a different forum.
Any other discussion about the table? Send it back to policy. Seeing none, let's call the vote. All in favor of sending us back to policy, raise your hand. I see unanimous. No and set. We're going to go back to a beginning part of the agenda for the appointment of our treasurer. I've confirmed that both CJ Butler is willing to serve another term as the SAU treasurer, and Peg is willing to serve as our deputy treasurer. So I can entertain a motion to appoint those. Great. Awesome. Motion made by Ms. Grund, seconded by Ms. Parisi. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Great, congratulations.
And thank you guys for stepping up to do that.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the update on our investigation into activities with one of our school board members. And the update is this. We are moving forward in terms of our forward momentum. The investigatory process, as I've been informed, has completed with communication to all of the involved parties, giving them an opportunity within inside the confines of the policy from a timeframe standpoint to make comments and sending it back. So this evening, we had received guidance from our attorney with regards to a motion to hire an outside independent decision maker in this particular matter, as well as consider to be an arbitration thing. So I'm going to make a motion to pass this motion, and today I'm going to get this over to you in just a moment. That this board authorizes its superintendent, with the assistance of counsel, to retain an independent initial decision maker in the pending Title IX matter involving its board member, and that further it requests that the parties be offered the opportunity to participate in a voluntary informal complaint resolution process with a mediator to be retained by the superintendent with the assistance of counsel prior to moving to the decision-making phase of the Title IX process. Said offer being contingent upon the parties agreeing to participate and to waive the time frame for the start of the decision-making process. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great, second by Mr. Gothier. Open it up for discussion. Ms. Beam.
Do we want to amend that at all to say superintendent or a designee, or were we going to assume that language from other things that we've done recently?
The time frame that was described, we'd be okay until our our June 7th date, and then our acting superintendent would become just obviously a part of, because he would be our appointed superintendent. June 10th.
Great. So can I just say, I mean, my understanding at this point, just to talk about where we are a little bit, is that Sarah Hillstad, I think that's her name, if I have it right, was retained to act as the Title IX coordinator. She did her initial look, decided there was enough to move ahead, that she would move ahead on a complaint on behalf of the aggrieved, one or more of the aggrieved individuals. That is, if I understand this right, that's no longer an issue because someone has filed a formal complaint. So we do have a formal complaint. I'd like to say, as a board, it's disappointing to me that there wasn't, and if you all got it in a private session, I apologize, because obviously I wasn't subject to those, but it's disappointing to me that there wasn't an announcement whenever that happened 2 months ago, that there had been a finding in the role as Title IX coordinator, because it seems like this board should have at that point been consulted and said, okay, move ahead with the investigation. And instead that all just zoomed ahead at rather exorbitant costs. My strong hope would be that a mediator like Dennis Ducharme would be retained, who could simply sit down with the parties involved and hope that some agreement could be reached, and that would be done quickly and expediently for everyone involved. So I guess that's not an objection to it, but I mean, we have this do alternative dispute and then appoint someone. And I'm just going to strongly express I really think we ought to be getting this resolved as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, let's call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. That motion carries. And Danae, I'll get this to you after. We can open it up for public comments 2 of 2.
Can I make a statement?
Sure, John.
That was a lot of language that I'm hearing for the first time. And it's contingent upon the parties agreeing. I would appreciate you forwarding me that language so that I can study it and understand what it means. Because that was pretty quick and the discussion was not as robust as it should have been, in my opinion. So please do that very quickly so that I can figure out if that's in my best interest and the best interest of my constituents.
Sure. Public comment 2 of 2.
Before we move to that, can I add one follow-on to what John said?
Yes.
I would just, to the extent we're going to have these things that the chair or anyone else has received that we're going to be discussing in either non-public or non-meetings or meetings, if that could be circulated ahead of time, because I appreciate your point. I mean, we got a little bit of time to read through it and talk about it in the non-meeting, but it is a valid point that, yeah, you just got this document read at you, and I appreciate that. And I too, I mean, it's nice, the more notice we can have on things like that so that we can have mulled it over before we come here, the better.
So noted. Thank you.
Hi, Jeannie Lute, Amherst. Again, this discussion of what's happened in this proceeding with Mr. Glover. Again, there's repeatedly things that have been mishandled, and I think I don't know if it's poor communication. I don't know what it is, but my sense is that if this were in a trial situation, they'd have to throw it out as a mistrial because there are just too many problems associated with it. That's not why I'm here tonight. What I wanted to talk about was Jfac because I am a member of Jfac, and I just want you all to feel very confident that the job that Jfac did in terms of reviewing multiple kinds of possibilities, they didn't, just land on the first one that they considered. There were many of them. So when we talk about, not feeling good that we didn't explore all of the possibilities or creative solutions, I just really feel like that was done. So I just wanted people to understand that I've been on a million space needs committees, and I get the fact that people think, oh, did you think about this and did you think about that? Believe me, they thought about that. So I just want you to know that the work was very thorough.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other members of the public like to address the board? Martin Goulet, Amherst. 2 topics I'd like to visit the Jfac discussion. The question of the application for state aid. I went back to the deliberative, the ASB deliberative materials, and there was a line in their presentation material that said that state aid is not awarded until a bond is approved by the voters. Now, could be that me and the 30 or 40 people that I've spoken with misunderstood what that meant, that was just the natural timing of things. And that's what actually was meant by that line. What was interpreted was, I think what I heard from board member Goulet Zimmerman, that it was a contingency and a requirement that the town passed that bond before state aid could be applied for. So that was the impression that voters, or at least the small population of voters that I was aware of, received. So when we, and again, and I made this point earlier, when we talk about trust and we talk about transparency and we talk about the community feeling like they can trust what you're saying, all of those things undermine that kind of credibility. So whether it was what you intended to communicate or not, that was what was communicated. Secondly, on the Glover matter, I have been in communication with the chair of this board and the SAU directly on this matter on right to know requests. And again, I'm just absolutely flabbergasted that someone couldn't have communicated to me that the answer to the questions that I keep coming back with have been answered. And yet no one deemed it necessary to give me that answer. Why is that the case? Why could you now in this board meeting say, we had the answer to the finding of an investigation was warranted? Although now it's for two different reasons, right? First, it was because the person who wasn't and then was the Title IX coordinator decided they were going to move forward on a complaint on really sketchy grounds, if you read the underlying text of the policy. But now somehow someone has come forward with a formal complaint. On what timeline has that happened? When was that going to be communicated in any way to anyone? This has been a very public proceeding, except for all of the important information. So I would say, and I'm going to direct this directly to the chair, I was pleased when another chair was nominated, and I was really hoping that someone else would be nominated, because I have no confidence in your ability to lead this group, because I think you hold information close to the vest. This board needs to do a better job of holding this chair accountable for getting the information they need to make the decisions they need, or else people like myself who listen carefully to these proceedings are going to continue to scratch our heads and say, what on earth is going on? And why are they able to let these proceedings go the way they're going? It's just the natural result of not holding people accountable to what they should be held accountable to. If I were Mr. Glover, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd probably just resign out of frustration. I can't understand why he wants to continue to serve in this capacity. Fix this problem. The mess that two of you made on this by just bungling this. You bungled it. You made stupid mistakes. You made bad decisions, either through being inept or having bad intentions. I'll have no way of ever knowing, but you made bad mistakes and you've put a board member in an untenable situation. I would echo the many urgings that you've received to fix this in a way that's going to gain some confidence of your fellow board members and the communities that you serve. Thank you for letting me go over. I'm pretty sure I went over. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we do not have a non-public to talk about what I think we were all thinking about. I never got it done.
I'm sorry, Stephen. It's I can be a public or I can be a board member.
Go ahead.
That was pretty powerful, Martin. I appreciate that. I think, and Jeannie, you said, Anna, like it's truth that the formal complaint has since come forward. That's news to me. This whole thing, our whole policy has due process built into it for good reason. It's a pretty good policy. It's not super well organized like many of our policies. And I've essentially submitted myself to this. I haven't even claimed that it's not applicable, even though it's not written for board members. This was an attempt to take a serious matter seriously, but the attempt has been failed. I have spent more than $16,000 of my own money, thinking from the very beginning that complaints had been filed against me under the threat of litigation from you in consultation with SAU counsel. And only today, for the first time, did you share the counsel directly with the board members? Terrible. What we have discovered through our own Q&A is there is no formal complaint per our policy. As far as I know, that is still true, which is why I had to formally decline the request for an investigation interview eventually, because we were at an impasse. My arguments have not been addressed through the lawyers. My arguments have not been addressed by you. So I'm out of forums. Now you're offering a third forum, which is totally news, a mediator. I don't even know what that means. But the reason why I haven't resigned my office is because it's more shameful to resign over this than to admit what happened publicly and be the cautionary tale and to give a sincere apology to the people in the room. I've been trying to do that since day one. You, Superintendent, know this, because my first emails were to you about this. You know this, Stephen O'Keefe, because my first emails were to you about this. Tom knew this. Stephanie knew this. Why was Tom involved? Because Adam made a mistake and included him in the email chain when he shouldn't have been. What was my response? No problem. It's better that all of our leadership know what's going on so that we can come to a sensible resolution with everybody involved. From the very beginning, this was November 10th is when these emails were dated, and all of these emails are in the public record. And now the investigation is over. The plan was from the very beginning, per your letter of December 1st of how this whole thing was going to go, applying these policies, was that the report was going to be issued, which, by the way, because of a formal complaint, you should never even take receipt of it. And now it's this mediation problem that's going to take months. You're not even going to, because of the advice of counsel, all of a sudden, where did this come from all of a sudden? I mean, what are you doing?
It's a fair question.
The process is changing now? Really? Are the policies still the right ones, or are those changed? I am beside myself. I have been comporting myself as professionally as I possibly can here before you, bringing evidence that's in the record in hopes that you would look at it. Has anyone here ever even read this policy? Does anybody here really know how important a formal capital F complaint capital C is to this policy, and how low of a bar it is to file one, and how important it is if someone else is going to file one that they follow appropriate tests in order to do so that there's some credibility in the decision-making process, that there's respect and courtesy built into the policy language? I don't think so. I don't think so. Did anybody ask the attorney when you were here about, gee, how the heck did this get started? Where is that formal complaint? And how come we haven't been able to see the engagement letter that Glover's been asking for forever and still not produced? Because it's attorney-client privilege. Nobody thought to ask, well, is it a good idea for us to waive privilege on some of these things so we can demonstrate that we have been in compliance with our decisions and our policies? Apparently not. And that's very disappointing to me personally. And I think it's an extremely disservice to our community, and it does nothing but engender further distrust, because your decisions are not reliable if this is the way you're behaving. Your policies are not reliable. We could work our asses off, all of us in policy committee, to do the best job we can. But if we in turn don't actually follow those, then they're trash. And they invite lawsuits and litigation and warrants not passing. This is the environment that you have created because you haven't shared it with anybody until today. Shame on this whole process.
I would like to make a statement.
You get to sit right there.
Is that fine?
Yeah, again, as a reminder,
Yeah.
we should not be discussing the details that Mr. Glover.
I do not intend to in any way. I apologize. I do not interrupt you.
Show everybody involved a very neutral sort of stance. And bye-bye.
And that is very important to me. What I'm going to say has nothing to do with Mr. Glover and the circumstances around what has led us to this situation. And I want to apologize in advance because this has hit a point of extreme stress for me, and I'm going to explain why. I know nothing of what occurred. I do not wish to know anything of what occurred because my understanding of my role was to act as somebody that was impartial and to be able to make the most informed decision on behalf of this community. I was sexually assaulted the first time at 14. I followed due process and I went through pure hell because it wasn't that big of a deal. Why did you make such a big deal out of it? At 20, I was exposed to pornographic material at my place of work against my will. Again, followed my processes. You're a problem. You're making an issue of something. You just shouldn't work here if you can't handle the culture. Fine. This is not to say that this circumstance is representative of those experiences, but what I find necessary to say is I'm not the only person who has had these experiences and has to sit and listen to these conversations and the flippancy that we have engaged in these conversations as if it is not important to not just represent one individual's interests, but both, and to protect everyone involved. And what I understand of reading Title IX policies is that we are following those requirements. There are more individuals than just those that are making the most vocal comments. There are more individuals that have the potential for litigation than just the accused if they are not happy with the results. There is also the person who has made the accusation that do we not follow these policies and due process as described by Title IX procedures, they have the opportunity for litigation, but that voice is not being heard. So what I think needs to be kept in mind is that we are hearing vocal comments on one perspective. And while I am not a part of this conversation and I have not had any personal experience, and I do not mean this as a reflection of you as an individual, and I want to make that clear, because again, I know nothing of what occurred and I do not imply any intent. What I'm saying is there are people physically here and there are people maybe watching on Zoom and reading these transcripts and seeing that they are not taken seriously. And should they have concerns and experiences, those will not be respected and they will be constantly questioned as they try to receive some kind of justice. And I'm not okay with participating in that quietly. So I just felt the need to say that. And I respect the process moving forward and I respect the process that has happened to date, but I felt that I could not move forward without making that clear.
Okay, we're going to move the conversation along. There is going to be no non-public. We will be dealing with that issue. We'll probably have to call an emergency meeting or an unscheduled meeting to deal with that particular matter. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Second. All in favor, raise your hand.